Thank you, everyone, and welcome to another Morning After. I'll be your host this morning, along with Bianca here to help run today's newscast. We have a very controversial topic for our viewers today that has created quite the buzz in recent media news: student loan debt and whether or not Congress should intervene with programs that can offer possible protection. We will also have several guest speakers join us for the show to break down elements of the issue and help people better understand the problems surrounding this debate.
Yes, Spencer, it should be a very exciting show today with multiple perspectives. And with that being said, I would like to welcome our first guest today on the set, Ross Lupino.
Thank you for joining us today, Ross.
Nice to meet you, Spencer.
Ladies and gentlemen, Ross Lupino, the author of Save Our Students, is joining us today to talk about his new novel based on loan debt and the challenges most students face financially at today's universities.
Thanks for having me, Spencer and Bianca. It's great to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you here, Ross. So why won't you tell us a little bit about your book?
In my book, I really wanted to dig deep on an issue that is causing an imbalance of wealth in our society and unforgivingly punishing those who simply had a desire to receive an education and achieve great things. Our national student loan debt is currently over $1 trillion and one of the leading causes of debt among Americans. While it is becoming increasingly necessary to earn a college education in order to succeed, it is also a lot scarier and a less accessible option for many Americans.
Why do you think today's aspiring youth may be daunted by today's student loan debt?
Well, we have not been doing enough to save our students. The situation has not been getting any better, and without a promising future ahead, students might be hesitant to go to college. They might be scared. The Student Aid and Fiscal Responsibilities Act of 2010 threw it all for a loop when they restructured the way that student loans worked. They made it so that way banks were out of the equation and it worked solely with the government. Instead of focusing on helping struggling students, the policy changes that they were making were focusing on profiting off of the students instead of helping them out. They were taking the focus off of profiting on the banks. Mm-hmm. There are students out there who feel like a consumer instead of somebody who's like trying to better themselves by pursuing an education. They're not a scholar in an organization of a higher achievement.
That's very disheartening, not only for future college graduates, but also for young students hoping to attend college. Why specifically, then, do you think there are students who suffering so much student loan debt? If they can't afford the loan payments, why are they accepting it?
Well, you see, Spencer, I think the problem lies in the exponential rate and the compound interest in the student loans. They accept these loans blindly, and it's a large sum of money, and that interest can accrue over a long period of time. Over time, the interest becomes a bigger problem than the original loan amount. Young students, when they're about 18 years old, don't know exactly what they're signing up for in these huge loans, and they're signing themselves to these contracts. Paying for college doesn't automatically mean you have a job, so you're paying for these big loans, and you don't necessarily have a job. Student loans are practically unforgivable, and they'll follow you all the way to the grave. And the IRS is probably going to garnish your wages if you don't pay them, so they'll follow you, so you have no way of getting away from it. If we're truly concerned about the future of our students, we cannot hesitate to refocus the current model of student loans to be more forgiving, transparent, and user-friendly to our students.
Well, thank you, Ross, for your insight, and if any of our viewers are interested in learning more about what you have to say, they can do so from you or your book, only available on Ross's website. It was a pleasure having you here on the show this morning.
Thank you, no problem at all. I think this is a critical issue that needs to be addressed to every being that has the power to do something about it, not just for the individual sake of our debt holders, but for the progress of our nation as a whole.
I would now like to introduce our next guest for today, Lee Goodwin, who is not quite as welcome to the idea of Congress instituting consumer protection and relief for students submerged in loan debt.
Good morning, Lee. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
It is my understanding that you are against the idea of government providing relief for students. What issues might arise from doing so, and what else could our government spend the money on?
Well, the national debt as of now is upwards of $18.6 trillion. Yes, trillions. If the government were to provide relief for every single John and Jane in the American collegiate system, that number would skyrocket to unfathomable reaches. I mean, let's face it, there are much better things we could spend our money on. Things like tax breaks, the military, our infrastructure, our secondary education, science and technology. I could spend the rest of the show talking about better ways to spend our money.
What do you consider to be the main problem that caused us to be in so much debt due to college funding loans?
Well, frankly, we wouldn't be sitting here talking about this if goddamn stupid teenager had just read their loan paperwork. If they decided to read the fine print instead of thinking, oh boy, more money, they would have known how much they were getting into. Now, I know there are some good kids out there, but 1 out of every few hundred doesn't exactly break the stereotype here.
That's an interesting perspective you've taken, Lee. Now, I understand you are not fond of the idea involving student loan and relief/forgiveness. But let me ask you a question I'm sure many of our viewers are thinking as well. What solution do you propose for solving this?
If we paid back every single teen who asks for debt relief, we're just going to be feeding their temper tantrums. If we acknowledge their mistakes and say, oh, it's okay, little guys, and throw what they want at them, then we're telling them it's all right to act that way to get what they want. They shouldn't get what they want when they act that way. They should work for it instead.
Thank you for shining a light on the opposition, Lee. It's important our viewers understand the negative impact something like this would have. It was a pleasure to have you join us in our discussion on such a difficult subject concerning so many students and graduates. Ladies and gentlemen, Lee Goodwin.
Thank you.
Now, our attention will go towards Jaime Polania, an exceptional economist who has spent a lot of time studying about debt, especially the debt made by taking out student loans. Jaime, from the point of view of an economist, tell us a little bit about how college degree and income relate to each other.
So we've always had this notion that college pays off and we've been better off for it. Even more so now than before, it had been a worthwhile investment. Not only do college graduates earn more over a course of their lifetime, they'll earn approximately $1 million more than someone without a college degree.
Is there any way race and age relate to this at all?
With the ever-rising rates has created a gap between different races and ages. The Advisory Committee on the Student Financial Assistance estimated that between 2000 and 2010, financial barriers would prevent nearly 2 million low and middle-income college-qualified high school students from attending college. A study found that 1/3 of whites between the ages of 26 and 30 have obtained a bachelor's degree. Only 15% of African Americans have done so, and only about 12% of Hispanics have completed such a degree.
Wow, that's incredibly eye-opening. I'm glad you mentioned the statistics, though, since that seems to relate better with our viewers. Approximately how many students and/or former students have accumulated loan debt, and typically how high are these loans per person?
It's a great question, Spencer.
Thank you.
Up to 3.7 million former students owe over $54,000, and 1.1 million owe over $100,000. Over 2 million Americans 60 or older still have outstanding student loans.
This is obviously a problem that persists long after graduation day. With such overwhelming numbers of students still in debt, you would assume the interest on these loans can only put more stress and emphasis on their repayment plans. Are there any interest rates involved with the loans taken out, and how might that affect the income of newly graduated students who just started a career?
The miracle of compound interest works against the student. A loan at 6%, interest doubles in 12 years. At 3%, it doubles in 24 years. The government, universities, and bankers have captured a substantial part of the student's future income stream.
Jaime, is it easy for a student to take out student loans? Would it be better to take loans from a private loaner?
Before student loans, college tuition was substantial, but it didn't threaten a student's long-term financial health. Working summers, a college kid could contribute a good part of the cost. The very existence of private loans to students is puzzling, since government guarantees were created only because private lenders would not lend to students with no credit history. But Congress changed the laws in 2005 when it decided that students could not get rid of their loans as a practical matter in bankruptcy. Private loans today offers the banks the best of all worlds. The loans cannot be erased in bankruptcy, but banks can charge any interest rate or fees that they want.
What about the cost of education? Has it gone up or down in the past years?
Reports show that the cost of higher education per student since 1983 has risen by 5 times the rate of inflation.
Wow, it appears from your research, universities haven't had an issue keeping up faculty with an increasing student body. It's surprising to learn there has actually been a rise in students with all these increases in tuition. I would assume this also means more students are looking for loans to help afford the costs.
The federal government currently lends money to big banks through Federal Reserve discount window at a 0.75%, but charges graduate students 5.4%. A Senator, Elizabeth Warren, a Democrat from Massachusetts, notes that the government is charging students, and I quote, interest rates that are 9 times higher than the rates for biggest banks, the same banks that destroyed millions of jobs and nearly broke the economy. That isn't right.
I'm under the impression you've come with a solution prepared that would help inform our audience and give a better understanding for the decision to accept a loan.
Properly, education costs should be viewed as if the student were constructing a building. If factory owners can depreciate their cost over the useful life of their buildings, why can't students depreciate the cost of their education? And why not let students write off their cost as fast as they want? The reduced tax bill will let students make a dent in their outstanding student debt. A doctor or a lawyer with student debt of $125,000 might earn $150,000 and owe $50,000 in taxes. Under my proposal, the professional could use a $125,000 deduction to save $50,000 in taxes. It would help.
Lastly, do you think that students should be entitled to relief for the debt that they have?
Yes.
Great, why do you think so?
Under existing tax principles, students should be entitled to some relief. Current government interpretations, however, are not exactly fair. Parents are not allowed to deduct tuition and related expenses paid for their children. Students themselves have had very limited success deducting education costs as a business expense. Existing tax law generally provides a deduction for the cost of producing income. Education is certainly a cost of earning income, but the Internal Revenue Service does not really see it that way.
Jaime, thank you so much for being here with us today. It was a pleasure to have you.
Absolutely. Your piece will have a huge impact on helping people understand the real dangers of taking on too much loan debt.
I agree. This issue concerns a lot of people nowadays, and it's worthy to have a show about.
Well, thank you for having me, guys. It was an honor to be here and discuss some really important aspects in our community right now.
Absolutely.
I've always been such a big fan of the show.
Oh man, it means so much.
I've been following The Morning After, ever since day 1, episode 1.
That honestly, it means so much to me. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for, just letting me be here.
Absolutely.
My career hasn't really, taken off, so it's just...
I know the feeling, man. Trust me.
Still living with my parents.
No.
Times are tough.
I'm in the basement.
I feel you.
Today we talked about the book that Russ Lupino wrote about student loans and the debt created by it. We had some opposition as well, coming from Lee Goodwin, who thinks that high school graduates should be more careful when agreeing to take out loans. Lastly, we discussed the matter with economist Jaime Polania, who presented some numbers for us showing how income relates to a college degree, how race and age affect that, and lastly, we talked about how the Congress should give some relief to students.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching us again this morning. As always, we appreciate all the tweets, Facebook messages, and emails that you send in during the show. If you'd like to contribute further on today's session, please go to our website at themorningafter.com. I'd also like to make a big shout out to all and thank all our guest speakers, Ross, Lee, and Jaime, for joining us today and discussing this important issue. From all of us here at the studio, have a great day, and be sure to stick with us next week for another controversial debate on The Morning After with Spencer Michaels.